I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. We've got the star of the show, as always, Mr. Homer Smith of Konvergent Wealth Partners. He's standing by. He'll be jumping aboard momentarily. But first, we got some housekeeping items to take care of. For those of you that are coming aboard with us now here on the Facebook live stream, we so appreciate you jumping aboard for the episode today. Hey, one of the perks of being with us on that Facebook live stream today is the ability to comment. It's that box right below. So feel free to throw a comment or a question down in that box. Homer and I will carve out some time to answer your questions, acknowledge those comments throughout the course of the show today. And that way we can not only hit our topic that we have lined up for today, but we can get any of your questions answered simultaneously. On the flip side, though, if you are jumping aboard this episode, maybe it's on YouTube or a podcasting platform after the fact, all the same, we still appreciate you being here. Would love to have you for maybe a future Facebook live stream. We love, like I said, having the comments and questions flowing through. Maybe you can jump aboard for a future show here on Facebook Live and get some of your questions answered as well. But hey, that aside, we got a great episode teed up for you guys today. Homer and I were just chatting before the show here, and this is a topic that Homer is dealing with regularly with almost all of his clients that he is working with over at Konvergent Wealth. And what we're talking about here is really just the idea of estate planning, really for entrepreneurs. The whole topic of the episode today is why entrepreneurs really need to have an estate plan in order. Too often, Homer was just telling me that too often he's finding that there are clients that are coming to him, realizing that, maybe the plan they had in the past isn't up to snuff, or they didn't have one to begin with. And boy, can there be some, shortcomings and some issues that can arise if your plan isn't in order when something happens. Something negative, of course, happens to you or your business. So, hey, I don't want to steal any more wind out of Homer's sails. Let's go ahead and bring him aboard, get today's conversation rolling. Homer, good to see you. Welcome aboard the show. How are you doing?
I'm well, Ryan. Thanks for having me back or having you join me again on the platform here today.
Yeah, I love it. Anytime we get together, we always have a good conversation. And again, I'm excited about today is just because you do have this conversation so often with your clients, and this being a show where we're bringing strategies and those conversations that you have with clients to the show. It's obviously a very pertinent topic that we want to dive into today. So we are hitting the idea of estate planning. So Homer, obviously, business owners, they're looking out for the financial well-being and the overall health of their company, but of course, they're also looking out for the loved ones, right? The family members, the people that they want their wealth to benefit, not only here in the present, but also down the road. That being said, why don't we zoom out just a little bit? Help us here, Homer, better understand the role of an estate plan, specifically with entrepreneurs. What are we dealing with here?
For entrepreneurs and successful business owners, estate planning really is vital for their family, for themselves, to really ensure that once they move along, once they pass, that the financial well-being of their family is really going to be taken care of. And oftentimes what we find is that the plans they have in place, if they have them, when we review them, the outcome that is going to come from that is not what they actually intend. So really the goal of proper estate planning, if done well, if done thoughtfully, is really at the end of the day to make sure that the assets and that wealth passes in the way that that business owner wants. And one thing that's really important to most of our business owners as well is the idea of if we can also then along the way eliminate as many state and federal estate taxes as possible. So it's really two key things: make sure their family's going to be okay and minimize taxes in that process.
Yeah. So Homer, then in your experiences in dealing with these types of conversations, do you find that most people, they recognize the need for a smart estate plan and maybe are taking steps already to ensure that that's a thing? Or do you find that you really need to start from scratch with a lot of these conversations?
The answer really is yes and no. The
Okay.
good news is from one of the studies done by AES Nation of successful business owners, 88%, so close to 9 out of 10, actually have at least a basic will in place. So they've at least gone through the basics of getting some of the basics set up, which at least is going to be helpful to starting the process and making sure that at least some of their wishes are enacted. So yeah, there's been some work done at least on getting some basics in place.
All right. So 88%, that's obviously a high number. That sounds good, but it sounds to me also like you're saying that there's also a way that business owners should be doing more in this effort to reinforce an estate plan. Talk to me about what they should be doing.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues. One of them is while they have a basic will in place most of the time, it's typically outdated. So that same study found that at least 85% or so of those that had that document in place hadn't had it reviewed in at least 5 years. And so again, a lot of things have probably changed in that time frame that may no longer make that document workable or valid, or at least going to result in the plan that they want to have happen. So a lot of things change along the way in our lives, and whether it's tax laws that change, we see that pretty regularly, and recent tax laws may make the current estate plan no longer working in the way that it should, or they're not taking advantage of some of those changes. Oftentimes as well, the changes that have happened in tax or state laws might make the current plans they have invalid, or at least make that happen sometime soon. There's also a lot of other changes that happen in their lives. So financial changes. I work with a lot of business owners that, in the last 5 to 10 years is finally when their business took off. They've been working, sweating away for 20, 30 years. And finally, in the last 5 or 10 years, they've seen a meaningful difference in how successful the business is. And their document was done 10 or 15 years ago before that occurred. And so again, a lot of the strategies they even have in the plan may no longer be workable. And then a lot of times things change within the family itself. So divorces, new kids, grandchildren, things that weren't accounted for in the initial estate plan, or what they'd recently done or previously had done, again, no longer is going to match what they want to have happen based on what was written so long ago. So again, while they have some pieces in place, often it's very much often outdated and no longer valid for what they're trying to accomplish.
Got it. So moving to my next question, Homer, obviously it sounds like in many cases these plans are outdated. Talk to me about how effective an outdated plan might be.
Yeah, I mean, kind of just as we alluded to, it's an outdated plan often is going to be ineffective because it's no longer going to account for all these changes that we mentioned. So it really is important that successful entrepreneurs and business owners really stay on top of that process, and identify those changes that are happening in their lives, whether it's family changes, changes within the business, or financial changes that would require them to at least begin starting to take a look at whether those documents need an update or not.
Homer, let's get into the weeds of it a little bit now. I mean, do you have any examples of maybe a situation where you saw how, an outdated plan really put an entrepreneur at risk, of losing, a ton, if not everything, that they've worked so hard for? Any examples that you might have?
Yeah, there's a number of examples of that, and starting with kind of a worst case scenario: no plan in place at all, so no will, no basic documents. And while there are rules at every state of how things progress, it leaves a lot open to interpretation. So all of a sudden, distant family members that you hadn't seen in years all of a sudden are showing up and wanting their piece of the wealth, creating all sorts of challenges for that immediate family to have to deal with all of these people who previously really weren't interested or engaged with the family at all. Other issues that often happen are with businesses that take on a new partner through the business, and all of a sudden that passing happens. Now all of a sudden there's a power struggle within the corporation, or within the family, for who's going to control the business going forward. And some of the other issues are things like, what if one of your children ends up with some sort of drug or alcohol issue, and all of a sudden, because planning wasn't done, they inherit a significant amount of liquid wealth that often can exacerbate the issues that they're dealing with. Now they have a large sum of money that could go create more of those problems, and so oftentimes those assets are spent down quickly, and unfortunately often can even lead to worse situations within that issue that they're dealing with. So those are just a few examples of the issues that we see that can develop from not having a proper plan in place.
Sure. I mean, not only financial risk, like you mentioned, but interpersonal relationship risks. There's a lot that can happen here without that proper plan in place. So, that being said, we've thrown a lot of negative, out there to our audience today, Homer. Let's say somebody out there, they're sitting there thinking, my estate plan might not be in order. Maybe I should be doing what I can to get this thing updated and make, give that sense of confidence to me. What would you say should be maybe some next steps for somebody if they have that outdated plan and they want to make sure they take, a proper next foot forward, if you will?
Yeah. Well, for a successful business owner or entrepreneur, I think there's a few questions that you should ask yourself, or bring in one of your trusted advisors to go through, that could really lead to whether an update is needed. And the first, they're pretty simple. It's basically what we've covered already. But the first one is: have there been any major financial changes to your life that would require potential adjustments to your estate plan? Two, has there been any major changes within your business, whether it's new partners, new stakeholders, or just the financial changes within the business that would require some additional planning work to be done? And then the third, has there been any changes in your family? Again, any divorces, children, new grandchildren that would necessitate, again, some additional planning work to be done within the plan. So those are the three things. If you were to answer yes to any one of them, it would make sense to at the very least have a review done on your estate plan, but very likely would lead to probably some adjustments and changes within the plan itself. So, ultimately, at the end of the day, the goal of estate planning, as we mentioned, is to make sure your wishes as a business owner, entrepreneur, are completed, and that the distribution at the end of the day happens the way that you want it. And so, without reviewing and updating the plan, oftentimes things aren't going to work out the way that you want them to.
Mm-hmm. Roger that. So 3 solid questions there to ask yourself whether or not updates to the estate plan make sense for you. Take us beyond that. Okay, somebody's asked themselves those questions. Maybe they answered yes to one, if not all of them. Homer, what are the next steps from there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenging questions, especially as your wealth grows, that you've got to deal with in determining how the estate plan is going to work. One of the big ones to start with is, how do you want people to receive the assets in your estate? Especially if you've gotten all the way through, maybe even having a liquidity event within the business. Do you want your heirs to receive those assets in a lump sum, or do you want to spread it out over time? And are there reasons to do that? Other questions are, do you want to approach this from what we would call a fairness or an equality approach? And by fairness, it means, based on the merits of the individual receiving it. So, is there a family member within the business, and would it be fair that they might receive a larger share of the equity in that business because of their work involved? Or are you going to come at it from an equality where everybody just gets, the same percentage overall? That's one of the most challenging questions we deal with a lot of our business owners. And on those same lines, how are you going to deal with the succession of the business? If it's not sold by the time you pass, again, do you have children within the business that you want to inherit the business? Is there a management team? What is that plan that you want to have in place for that? And then finally, do you have all the key documents that you need to have in place, just not only just for your basic estate planning, but maybe some more of the complex components? So at a very base level, just making sure some of the key pieces like a will, powers of attorney for financial and healthcare, living wills, and also an inventory of all of the assets. Those are just some of the key pieces that you want to make sure are in place, and that you've answered those base questions that we discussed earlier.
Boy, Homer, I feel like so many times in our conversations, it seems like regardless of the topic, it really does come back to, in many cases, having documentation in order, just keeping a good, archive of your various, finances, your situation to be able to review back to things. And then obviously, you know, plot a decent path forward for yourself. But as we're bringing our conversation to a head today, Homer, on estate planning, do you have any other tips or maybe a warning, even a bottom line for anybody that's going through this process, looking to revise their estate plan? Any final thoughts you might want to leave somebody with today?
Yeah, I think one important component, I'm smiling because it kind of goes against my nature, in that, one of the key things we mentioned earlier as part of estate planning is we try to help our clients reduce or eliminate their state or federal estate tax burden. But I think at the end of the day, what's really important to think about first and foremost with estate planning is that we don't want to let the tax tail wag the overall financial dog here. And that really, at the end of the day, the goal of estate planning is to make sure your assets are distributed in the way that you would like, and that your goals are attained and how you would like to see that happen. And that oftentimes, tax planning is a part of that strategy, but we don't want to lead necessarily with the tax side. And so really, it's what do you want for your family first, and then that leads back to the different solutions and strategies we might employ. And oftentimes those come with tax savings, but we want to make sure that really it's about your goals, what you want for your family, make sure your family's okay first, and then we bring in the tax solutions next. So just not really, just wanted to make sure that there's not an over amount of a focus on the tax planning and the structuring of the plan itself, but let's start with your family first and what you want for them.
I love that. Well, Homer, for those individuals that are out there in your audience today, maybe they're thinking about the fact that they don't have an estate plan in order, or maybe they haven't even thought about it in a long time, maybe, or maybe they don't have one already. For anybody that's thinking about getting the ball rolling on this process or getting it re-rolling and really updating. And maybe they're interested in reaching out to you and your team over at Convergent to just start that conversation and see what this looks like for their specific situation. How would you say is the best way they could go about reaching out to you and your team to get this conversation started?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I'd always start with, and we've talked about this many times on our sessions together, is really the need to do as a part. If you think the estate planning is a key issue, it's really starting with a bigger discovery in mind first. So, really looking at your entire picture to see how all of your financial components fit into your estate plan. So, looking at your overall tax planning, your retirement planning, asset protection, all of the components together to get to know you well enough to know what are the right solutions and what is the best way to construct an estate plan for you overall. So at Convergent Wealth, we don't complete an estate plan. We're not attorneys, but we get to know our clients at a level so that we can really help them identify what they want to see out of the back end of that estate plan. So the first step is discovery and understanding what's most important to our clients. And that's really the first step we have with any new client that we bring on board. And so the best way to start that process, if you're interested, is sending an email to me at Homer, Homer, at Convergent Wealth, Convergent with a K. And we can pop that up on the, at least the replay version of this that we see. But that's going to be the best way to start. Reach out to me. Love to start a conversation and see how our process might benefit you to make sure that, again, at the end of the day, what you want to see happen through your estate plan is what ultimately is the result, so that your family's okay, the causes that you care about are taken care of, and at the end of the day as well, try to reduce that tax burden as much as we can.
All right, awesome, Homer. Well, look, appreciate you carving some time out of your day to be aboard here on the Facebook Live with us to just chat through estate planning. We'll let you go. We'll let you get back to some of these very similar conversations with your clients, but we appreciate you being here with us today.
Thanks, Ryan.
All righty. Thank you, Homer. And look, hey, we want to take one final moment, as always, to thank you, our audience, right, for jumping aboard with us and being on this show today. If you liked what you saw and you liked what you heard, I'll say it again. If you liked what you saw, you liked what you heard, you enjoyed any of the information that was portrayed in our conversation today, do us a favor, comment on the show, subscribe to it on any of the platforms that you're checking us out on, and then share. It's always about sharing, right? Share this information with friends, family, maybe some business owners that you know, because at the end of the day, these conversations on this show, they're meant for you. These are the tips, the strategies, those successful endeavors that Homer and his team are utilizing over at Convergent Wealth to help advance his clients' wealth. It's in the name of the show, right? And we'd hate to have you miss out on any beneficial conversations that are coming down the road. So for Mr. Homer Smith, I'm Ryan Ruff. We're going to say so long today, and we appreciate you one more time for joining us here on the latest installment of Advance Your Wealth.